So one argument I get from people insisting that Forerunners were never human is that Joe Staten actually admitted that the whole thing was a theory that Bungie never approved, and that Joe was one of the people leading the charge to claim that the two were separate the whole time. Which is also funny because the same people insisting that are the same people insisting that Joe Staten went rogue, hijacked Contact Harvest, and wrote that humans and Forerunners were the same, against Bungie's wishes. Because I guess Joe wanted them separate and the same all at once. These arguments I often run into with people. First, where did Joe say that all of this was one big theory that Bungie never wanted to explore? In an interview back in 2004, here's what was said. The interviewer asked, "Modern humans are descendants of the Forerunner?" And Joe said, "That's an interesting theory. Therefore, humans and Forerunners were always meant to be separate according to Bungie and all other evidence is moot." This is typically how people argue online, so let me show you how I reason things out and answer this question. Two things. First, what's the context of the interview? Second, let's look at literally everything else Joe has said on the topic. First off, the interview took place in October of 2004. That matters because this interview takes place prior to the release of Halo 2. Why does that matter? Let's just say an interviewer was talking with George Lucas before the release of The Empire Strikes Back, and the interviewer asked, "Is Vader Luke's father?" And Lucas just flat out says, "Of course he is. It was supposed to be a secret with a big reveal, but you figured it out, so go and tell everyone so the reveal is watered down and less exciting." That would be completely asinine. I mean, granted, everyone who actually paid attention already kind of knew that humans were Forerunner, because I think Bungie was unfortunately a little too obvious about it in Combat Evolved, but they still wanted a big reveal at the end of the Halo games. Secondly, Joe Staten is the one who has always been hinting at humans and Forerunners being the same.
He looks excited, doesn't he?
Yeah.
All of our lost time? What does that mean?
Human history, is it?
Oh. Fascinating. That's a clue.
Not to mention the fact that he wrote Contact Harvest, which was meant to reveal all of the main secrets. Contact Harvest and Halo 3 were meant to complement each other and show that the reason the Covenant go to war with humanity is because they are the left-behind Forerunners. What people are doing is taking this interview with Joe and they're twisting his words to try and make it sound as though he's confirming all of their suspicions. You know that scene at the end of Halo 3 with Spark?
You are Forerunner!
Well, we can use this interview to argue that Spark is actually glitchy because Joe said, if Spark is to be believed, which can only mean that he's unreliable. This is how many of these people are coming away with the idea that humans and Forerunners are separate. They're completely taking all of his quotes out of context to justify the retcon that happened in Halo 4. Joe is clearly picking his words carefully during this interview because the interviewer asked, 343 Guilty Spark believes that the Master Chief is a Forerunner, and Joe says, Spark being a Forerunner creation would certainly recognize one of his makers, but he never clarifies what he means by reclaimer, and ends with, but that's all he ever really says on the subject. Joe never once says that humans are or are not Forerunner, he just repeatedly keeps being vague. But if he says they are, then the reveal is spoiled, and if he says they are not, then he's going to confuse people if they are. Notice how throughout the interview he'll give yes and no answers, but when it comes to the Forerunners, he keeps being vague about it. Why would he need to do that if humans are not the descendants of Forerunners? He wouldn't, but the people take the interview out of context to try and get the answer they want. Now, if we had no other clues about the two being the same, would that solidify the argument that they were always separate? Not really, but we'd still have far more evidence that they were always separate because of Halo 4. But this interview was not confirming that Joe is saying that Bungie never agreed that they were the same, and he most certainly is not saying Spark is glitchy. Based on my experience with this whole conversation I've had with people, it's just more grasping at straws to try and justify the Halo 4 retcon from 343. Well, that was fun. Thanks for watching.